the party before to end the network. And there were a lot of great conversations happening. We do have a reception this evening, which is good. Give us more time to chat. Okay, so hopefully during the break you had an opportunity to review the meeting summary from our April 17th meeting earlier this year. As you review it, we're open to take any changes or suggestions for correcting the minutes, or not minutes, the summary. And then if there are none, then we'll need a motion and a second to approve them. Are there any additions or corrections to the summary? A motion to approve. Bob Lee has made a motion to approve.
I'll second.
John Holly second. Oh, Charlie. Oh, sorry.
We sound.
Charlie second.
They look the same.
I just heard voices. All right, all those in favor, nod your head. And the head nod is going to be our, we're going to get bobbleheads and they'll be our key thing. All right. Great. With that, we are going to move on to our second to last agenda item for the day. We're going to get a resilience update. It's going to come from the Resilience Ad Hoc Working Group, so there will be a tag team here of a couple of different commenters. And so we starting with you, Shelby. Excellent.
All right, thank you, Gina. As Gina mentioned, this is going to be a little bit of a presentation, but primarily a discussion led by the Resilience Working Group. And for those of you who need a refresher, this working group was formed as a result of the visioning exercise that OPAC did 18 months ago, 2 years ago.
December 2015.
Resilience was one of the 4 topics that we settled on, which also included the rocky shores topic that we discussed earlier today, marine debris, and ocean acidification. So this is a chance for the Resilience Working Group to circle back around and talk a little bit about some of our process, some of the work that's been done, and a proposal that we have in front of you with respect to a letter that would come from OPAC moving forward. As a reminder, the folks who constitute this working group include myself, Gina, Jennifer Purcell, Chris Wall, and Walter Judd. We have been having discussions within the working group since its inception, and that also included discussions within OPAC as a body that was led by some of my staff at Oregon Sea Grant. As part of the process, we were also really fortunate to be able to engage with a group at Oregon State University. It was through a course called Applied Research Methods in the School of Public Policy. Dr. Hilary Boudet teaches this class, and it is an opportunity for graduate students at OSU to take a topic and really not only hone their skills with respect to research, but also be able to produce a deliverable. One thing that I think was particularly compelling about this is that I just mentioned who the working group was. We had limited capacity in order to really dig into this topic, and this class were comprised of a bunch of eager, smart students who could help us move this forward. One of them is here with us today, Anna Freitas. And if you have any questions about the report that you have in front of you, she is here and able to answer them. The report that you do have in front of you was a big piece of our discussion, but it was not certainly the only thing. We did have, as I mentioned, some discussions internally, as well as we benefited from the discussion that OPAC had early on. So with that, I will pass the ball on over to Walter to talk a little bit more about what we are recommending.
All right, after many meetings, a couple OPAC meetings and conference calls between the group and working with the students, we basically came up with this letter and with some recommendations. We kind of compromised, compiled a few things from the letter and some of our own ideas put in from the working group members. So first I'd like to welcome Mike Harriman and from the Resilience Office, and looking forward to some of his input on this also. And let's just go down piece by piece. Our first part would be to take a few minutes and read the first couple paragraphs, and then we'll go to the 3 bullet points that we're suggesting.
Can you scroll to the recommendations?
That's me.
Oh, it's here. Oh,
It's me.
It's magic.
You also should have a copy of the letter in front of you.
Yeah, I do.
That's easier, but I know for these folks.
Okay, has everybody had a chance to read the first couple paragraphs?
First 3,
First couple.
Paragraph or the recommendation?
have a couple.
And then we'll go down to the recommendations. So the first one is consider resilience broadly, allowing for expanded discussion beyond the anticipated Cascadia event. One of the reasons we brought this up was that, everybody's concentrating on Cascadia right now, but we don't know when it's going to happen. So we need to concentrate on other parts of resiliency, whether it's ecological, economic, and other issues. So the next part is we recommend that communications, planning, and actions originating from the Chief Resilience Officer should not be limited to the Cascadia event, but also include other factors impacting resilience, such as natural, social, and economic changes due to climate change, impacts, and changing ocean conditions, which are presently occurring. And Mike, if you want to add in any time, just raise your hand. You deal with this stuff quite a bit, so.
You're on a roll.
The table.
Does anybody have any comments on that first sentence, that first part?
Hey, Walter, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
So one of the things that I think we should highlight is that second sub-bullet, which is by being expansive about the idea of resilience, so incorporating Cascadia, but also thinking a little bit more broadly, we are in fact continuing to support the governor's agenda as well as for Cascadia, so they're not mutually exclusive.
Right, the other part of that was action supporting resilience more broadly will also be supportive of planning for this Cascadia event and other priorities for the governor's office.
One other point I'd add in terms of the evaluation of things, there's a lot of activities and events that occur that require resilience that aren't a big catastrophic event. I mean, you can see by consistent flooding, issues with Highway 101 that are affecting economies. There's a lot of things that happen, increased storm surge they anticipate is gonna happen. There's a lot of things that support this bullet, as you're saying, but also extend beyond Cascadia.
Okay. We'll go on to the next bullet point, promote multi-level coordination among state agencies regarding resilience, broadly defined, and increasing ability of information for local governments. Part of this is, we talked to many of the members of the committee, but also counties up and down the coast are dealing with this difference. Some have more ability to deal with this subject than others. And so if we could get a way for all these entities to get better access to this information, we thought that would be a good idea. So we're saying we recommend the Chief Resilience Officer consider implementing an information clearinghouse to provide access to resources for local planning and action, and supporting and encouraging the incorporation of resilience more broadly into Oregon's regional solutions, priorities, and planning activities. comments, suggestions? I can't believe we did that good.
It's the post-cookies, we
I know. So we'll go on to the last one. Examine statewide planning goals for opportunities or barriers to promoting coastal resilience. So what we're saying is we encourage the Chief Resilience Officer to work with the Department of Land Conservation and Development and other pertinent agencies to examine the statewide planning goals and address any barriers to ocean and coastal community and ecosystem resilience. One of the main drivers with this is there's a reference to it in the analysis done by the students. Some of the planning goals might be, I would say barriers, but might make some of the implementation of resiliency policy a little bit harder. Some examples. Anybody with some examples? Shelby or Chris that were brought up?
I think one of the ones that was identified in the report that the students put together for us was just some of the broad land use planning goals and the strict urban growth boundaries. And we've seen this is directly tied back to Cascadia, not thinking more broadly, but directly to Cascadia. When we're looking to place or relocate certain facilities outside of the tsunami inundation zone, there's some communities where that's outside the urban growth boundary, and so then we're running into an issue with how do we expand urban growth boundaries. I think this is something most of us at some level are familiar with, but that I think is one of the examples of where there's some of the land use planning goals might actually have barriers to improving community resilience.
Just have to
Patty?
add there, because I represent the LCD. I just have to add that we have a classic example in Seaside that's kind of the poster child for tsunami inundation zones. I believe 90% of the structures in Seaside are within the tsunami inundation zone, and all their schools were. So they wanted to build a wall. They wanted to find a site where they could put all the schools. There was nothing large enough within the urban growth boundary, so they found a piece which actually was subsequently donated by the timber company adjacent to the urban growth boundary. And our agency, the LCD, worked with them, and they submitted a plan amendment, and actually now have successful funding. They've passed a ballot measure, not a ballot measure, but they passed funding to actually build that campus. It's actually going to be a community evacuation center. So, yes. So, I don't need to get into details there, so I won't even get into that. But it's like, well, what do you do with the property that's being abandoned? That's really the only question that's left with us. But I mean, we built that into our urban, looking at urban growth boundaries, that people can actually say, well, that area is not really buildable and not available because it's in a tsunami zone. So I think I think it's great to look at that, but I also think that it's something that there's kind of built resilience into the statewide planning goals to be adaptable to local conditions. So I'll just leave it at that and say that Seaside's kind of a classic example of where we've worked through that and successfully worked through it.
Well, and if you have specific edit changes to make to the language, I mean, that's one of the discussion points for today. If you wanna make that more explicit in this bullet, you can do that.
I may have looked at this report before, but it looks like I need to look at it.
One in the report, I mean, so my example was specific to tsunami inundation land use planning, but I don't know that we have all the data behind what the students collected through surveys and interviews and questionnaires and whatnot with folks, but it came up in their surveys, one of the areas that ranked high was this, at least perception or stated concern from the folks they were interviewing with, that some of the goals were barriers. Now, I don't know that we have all the specifics, but that's why there's this recommendation to look into where that came from and what some of it might be.
Jennifer, do you want to add anything? Jennifer, do you want to add anything? I mean, you brought up the regional solutions about economic resilience and things like that.
Technically, I wasn't the one that brought that up, but I can talk, I
Okay.
can speak to it. So I've had the opportunity to chat with Mike a little bit about the regional priorities and regional opportunities, but for those of you that don't know, I represent DEQ on the North Coast Regional Solutions team, and the notion that economic priorities for the state are identified in each of the regional solutions team work plans I can speak to ours, it incorporates resilience as one of our regional priorities. I don't know whether that's the case statewide, and so that was sort of around, so this would be the recommendation above, Chris, if you wanna scroll up, but the notion of state agency coordination and the fact that we have state agencies co-located throughout the state, and where resilience more broadly defined than just Cascadia can be incorporated into regional priorities. That was something that we talked about.
On that, where it says, promote,
Oh, I changed, I'm sorry.
so the promote multi-level coordination among state agencies, is that coordination among the agencies or by the agencies with other levels of government?
It was intended to be among.
Among the
I
state
think it's
agencies?
both.
And both.
I think it's both. It should be both.
So how can we change that to be more clear?
You could say among state agencies and with, as well as state and local government.
Well, I guess what I didn't understand is the multi-level then among state agencies. I was thinking of state agencies kind of being one level of government.
Right.
That's why I was tripping up. Because in the report, I took it as more coordination of providing information from state agencies to local government decision makers as they implement state policies.
Maybe it would be
But I gave
removing
it a quick read
multi-level
last night.
and just saying promote coordination among state and local agencies.
That's the way I think it should be.
Did I capture that correctly?
So
Add
state and local.
And
State
local.
And, if any of you are familiar with the Ruffles House Center report that was released in Washington earlier this year on coastal resilience, they had a recommendation in there, similar to this, really trying to create these regional clearinghouse type centers and hubs that physically located on the coast, so I mean, different model, but that same need of bringing information locally out to the coast and having multiple folks together as that resource. And so I think as this one's explored, there's a similar recommendation from another independent study that was conducted up in Washington.
David?
Small wording change just for readability in the third paragraph. Where it says incorporate issues are, it should be probably say incorporate issues that are. That makes it read better.
Yes, I am trying to try to choose exactly that one. Okay.
Can you also introduce yourself?
I will. Yeah, for the record, I'm Mike Kerman, the State Resilience Officer. I was confirmed by the State Senate on May 26, 2016. And it's a statutory position within the governor's office. And it's got a very small paragraph in there, talks about the primary responsibility of the resilience officer being seismic safety and resiliency. So walking into the position, there was there was an immediate conversation about, was I just going to focus on the Cascadia subduction zone, and my preference was not. My background coming out of public health as Director of Emergency Operations for 10 years was all hazards. It's kind of how the state does things. The subduction zone will happen someday, but we have wildland fires, droughts, floods, tornadoes. We have all kind of hazards that are happening, and we're seeing them happen on a more frequent basis. So I didn't receive any pushback on that, so I do kind of sell myself as an all-hazard individual. This report kind of fills a gap that I think has been out there for a while. When the Oregon Resiliency Plan was submitted in 2013, February 2013 to the legislators, Chapter 3 focused on the coastal communities. Mainly on the infrastructure piece of it. And since that amount of time, there's been a lot of movement to do quite a few other things. But I've been kind of wondering, besides talking to county emergency op managers, who I know very well up and down the coast, you know, how to connect to a more broader group of people that speak on behalf of the coastal communities. And, you know, today, the light bulb went off and figured this might be the commission that can really, you know, help me get feedback, help me have a conduit to talk about coastal issues. We can talk about infrastructure, but one of the things that I'm most concerned about is the impact to the coast, not only during the earthquake and the tsunami, but the long life after that. So during this last legislative session, Dogami's director and myself met with the Coastal Caucus, and you should all know that that's probably, in my opinion, the strongest caucus in the Capitol. And they were very direct about right now changing the tsunami line based on good scientific data that Dogami had produced in 2013. And one of the key things that came out of those one-way listening sessions, quite frankly, were the Coastal Caucus just feels like the coast has been overly regulated, and they've been feeling like they've been pig-piled on by both the state and federal agencies, and they didn't want to have more regulations coming on board that they felt was going to impact the economy of the coast.
Amen.
So, having said that, you know, the message was heard loud and clear. So, the biggest thing that, you know, what I'd like to get out of this is a couple things this report briefly touches on that are extremely interested in is the index. There is a group from Portland State, U of O, Office of Emergency Management, the Oregon Emergency Management Association, a nonprofit called Cascadia Prepared, looking at how to do measurements on resilience. We've bounced the word from index to scorecard, and the main thing we want, from my standpoint, is I have national data. I think I can look at FEMA information, I can look at public health preparedness index information and kind of get an idea where the state's at. But what we did want to do is rank the counties against each other. We wanted to make them useful that if a county wanted to see their profile and where they're at on the index, you know, was what kind of index could we use. So I'm glad you, in this report, talk about it. We've looked at stuff all over the nation, but I didn't know Texas A&M did one, so I'm really interested in that coastal index and how that might be able to be brought into the conversation. And then the clearinghouse pieces, I'm intrigued by that because, you know, when you look at the state agencies, the way they are, they've been around a lot longer than the resilience officer position. So the resilience officer was just kind of dropped in, you know, based on the Cascadia subduction zone. However, there's a lot of data out there amongst the state agencies, and so trying to point to that or bringing it in the national data, I'd like to look at that. And so I've been tasked by the Chief of Staff to provide an update on the resilience plan by next February before the short session. So we're working with the Department of Administrative Services to come up with a website to provide some updates of what's in progress and what's been completed from the resiliency plan and what still needs to be done. And, you know, quite frankly, I work really closely with Jason and Rucci on climate change. I believe that we are seeing that, we're seeing the direct impacts of that, and those are the impacts that we see on a year-to-year basis versus a large-scale earthquake. So it's all kind of coming together, and you know, I just appreciate the fact that you have this report here, and this is some stuff I can do a deep dive, and I can also reference it when I'm talking to legislators or to policymakers either in the office or to agency directors when we have those conversations. So thanks for doing that.
Well, just the graduate was the students at Oregon State that did all the work, and one of them is here in the audience. We thank them already, but that's really where, you know, the work was done. We just kind of asked for that to happen, so. But I just wanted to acknowledge the folks that actually did the groundwork.
Yeah, I met her a little bit earlier. And you know, the beauty, as I mentioned to Shelby, that Johns Hopkins University did something similar to this about wildland fires and electricity in the Northwest, and so there is some really innovative things going on that we could talk about at a later date, but they're trying to make the coast more resilient using microgrids and things like that, and self-determination, and also some of the things that we see what ODOT wants to do and some of how they want to present in pre-stage equipment on the coast. And also there's some blend lease bills I'll talk about that came out with a $5 million bonding. So I just gave my card to Laurel that I heard her mention at least 3 times this morning about equipment they looked to buy, but they couldn't get it into a grant. Well, there's a $5 million bonding grant called the Resiliency Grant Program that is just gonna be established by the Office of Emergency Management. So the Lend-Lease program concept from Representative Evans' point of view was get a little bit of seed money, $5 million in bonding, work with the states, counties, and tribes, and come up with a laundry list of things the state can purchase under their buying power, let it go to the counties, cities, or tribes, and they can use it day to day, but it'll also add to their capacity in a disaster. So I'd be interested to hear, how that can help with debris removal, because, we need to remove some debris, because some of our response capabilities will come off the ocean, the Department of Defense, and to the coastal communities. And so I think the more that the community can help in that effort, the faster we can get resources into the communities during that bad period of time.
Great.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, and also I just wanna thank you for coming, you spent the whole day with us, and I know it's long, but I appreciate it.
This is one of those beautiful things that today was my day, it was all clear. I didn't get anything competing for the last 6 weeks, and I said, man, I think I'm really gonna get to an Astoria. So it was really nice to be able to do that.
You just have to come and sit inside all day.
Well, it gets a little wet outside after the last 12, 13 days of beautiful weather.
Megan?
Thanks. So my question is really more one of kind of context in the bigger picture, and I had to ask Andy before I asked this question because I didn't want to ask something stupid. So this looks really great to me, the recommendations, and it looks like the grad students have done some great work that, on a personal level, I would love to dive into. But my question actually is, so this letter is calling for the Chief Resilience Officer and the state agencies to implement these sort of resiliency goals or guidelines, but what is OPAC doing itself? How are we implementing these same guidelines within the territorial sea plan, or just as guidelines for this kind of advisory body? And then could we also implement within the language, so not just the officer or the state agencies, but maybe other advisory groups like this one that also interact with the coastline, could we also request for them to incorporate these resiliency principles? 'Cause I don't know all the advisory bodies to the governor, but
Great question. Shelley, would you like to respond?
Sure, I think that's a really great question. And I certainly think that there are opportunities for OPAC as a body to be able to incorporate the concept of resilience into some of its work moving forward. When we think about the Rocky Shores, when we think about other initiatives moving ahead, one of the big challenges that we have as a working group is resilience as a topic is unbelievably expansive. And in the absence of a more specific nugget to orient around, we were sort of perpetually bouncing between topics.
yeah.
So for OPAC as a body to be able to incorporate that concept into its work moving forward, absolutely, I think is something that we can do. It's a little bit more challenging with respect to other commissions because we can't actually tell them what to do.
Right.
But with respect to, nice work, the work of the state agencies, we're not even actually telling them what to do either. We're just offering recommendations, which is, as an advisory body, it's kind of what we can do. And so maybe that's something that we could then take and offer forward in other forums.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering, because it's addressed to the governor, really more focused at, you and your position, if there wasn't a way to kind of also incorporate, I know we can't tell the other advisory councils or kind of working groups what to do, but if there's a way we could also sort of offer those resiliency principles to others, or, that would be covered.
Well, this is a very good example that, I do hear from amongst the other policy advisors, all the agencies they work with, and those commissions and boards and stuff like that. This is slowly but surely drifting. They're all addressing this one way or another, but this is another example. Currently there is the State's Oregon Seismic Safety Policy Advisory Commission, OSPAC, that I provide policy to. They're the ones that wrote the resiliency plan. And across the board, whenever I talk to any state agencies, or read a document, or when they're, in fact, even when they were doing their policy option packages last year, the term resiliency popped up. And I would say the natural resource group does it more than probably any of the other clusters within the governor's office really speak about resiliency. Right behind them, I would say, is public safety, believe it or not. So, you guys, the natural resource group does an outstanding job talking about resiliency from all the agencies. Now, is that from their workforce or their directors, how that drifts into their commissions and advisory groups, I'm not sure, but I'm getting the sense it's happening, but on a very informal basis. But this would be, when it gets to the governor's office, it would be something I can use as an example to share with other state agencies that have commissions and boards and advisory groups.
Jennifer?
Thank you. So I was gonna actually build off of what Megan just said, thinking about resilience more broadly, and as Shelby stated, the group really struggled with sort of how does resilience relate to OPAC's charge, and how do we relate those? One of the things we talked about is beyond Cascadia and even beyond other natural hazards, resilience from the perspective of coastal community resiliency, economic resiliency, social, environmental. And I just got to thinking back to the human dimensions research that's being done around marine reserves. In some ways, that's evaluating the resiliency of those communities in light of new policies that affect their coastline, their economy. So I don't know if there's a way to tie those, but thinking about how we engage resiliency in all of our priorities and all of the work that we do may be something for this group to just incorporate as part of everything we do, as opposed to having it be its own project moving forward.
More of an underlying principle.
Fred, go ahead.
I'd like to point out that not every solution has to be totally dependent on the government. The government is fabulous for planning, but as you saw in Houston here recently, most of those people were saved by small little private boat owners who just went out on their own and started collecting people and families off isolated little islands out there. In this state, I don't know about buying heavy equipment, we have farmers and excavators and things who have hundreds of pieces of heavy equipment that in an emergency would probably avail of themselves and their equipment. So a real good emergency plan would try and figure out how to take advantage of that, how to bring those people in, because I know they would come and help. So it's just something to consider. We don't have to spend millions of dollars in order to have equipment standing by. It's all out there. You probably know people I know people who buy heavy equipment for their own personal recreation. And it's true, and it's a different group.
I can think of a couple.
Yeah. If you live in the city, it seems like just strange. You'll have people who live out in the country who have some forest land or something. They can hire a logger to come in and work on it, or they can just play with it themselves. And there's millions of dollars worth of equipment around the state that can be brought to bear.
David, then Terry.
Terry, go first.
Terry?
This resiliency thing, Lincoln County's been a leader in a lot of this stuff. I agree with what you say, but trying to make contact to know where these people are with all this heavy equipment is a challenge. That's one of the reasons that we signed an agreement with some fishermen so that we could contact them anywhere they were in the world, and they would help us out in case we are the ones that have the tsunami. So Darren at Kodiak, they're in the mid-Pacific. I think Lauren Goddard, you're even one of the guys that signed up. His charter boat could be used for transport. That doesn't cost money, very little money, to put together that kind of information network so that you can make your state more resilient. The other thing that we have in Lincoln County that's amazing amount of success. We looked at our facilities where we say are the designated sites. They've got all these plans, but guess what? They don't have any food, they don't have any water, they don't have anything there for resiliency. So we took a small amount of money and said, okay, we'll let any city or school or anything like that, if you're willing to match 5,000, we'll give you 5,000. Guess what? Over 5 years, we've got a county that's got food, water, all these devices, tents, all this stuff ready. It didn't cost us very much money, but you've got to do the work and set it up. I don't expect the government to come save our ass back. If anything, I don't think we'll see you for a couple of years over there, but I hope you're there the day it happens. We're even looking at setting up our own contacts out of the state, figuring that you're not going to be able to help us out, and private contractors to come in and help. There is that capability. There's a lot of things you can do if you'll go out and be innovative, and with a very small amount of money can do a lot of resilience.
Thanks. David, then let's finish up on the letter. David?
I don't know how I can follow that.
Then
But
Ben?
I'll try. But just a quick, to Megan, your point, you raised a good point, but, you know, when you make changes to the territorial C plan or amendments, that's really a focused effort, and it's really got to have really defined goals, and it does involve particularly just one agency, and then that kind of filters out to others as directives. You have to read the statutes and how they work together, but this letter is a separate way that OPAC can offer advice, which is not formally through a territorial C plan amendment, but more generally to the state agencies to try and work on issues. And if in working on those issues, they feel that the territorial C plan should be amended, then that can come back to us for further review. So it's kind of a several-step process. And it does acknowledge the territorial C plan, but maybe not just yet, maybe further on down the road.
Thanks. One last comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wasn't sure I had like the exact avenue of
Yeah.
how to incorporate it. I just wanted to propose the question of how is OPAC itself incorporating this letter, because I thought it was really good and obviously it will work for you. So just something to think about, whether it's guidelines for this council or something that we could implement ourselves versus or as well.
Well, if you put together guidelines, usually that's going to be in conjunction with guidelines that the state agencies, in us giving advice to the state agencies, might try and utilize. For us, just to do it for ourselves, we're really part of working with the state agencies and local governments, not just for ourselves.
Go out anyway.
So it's kind of more outreach that we do. And the governor's office, too, I don't want.
All right, this last comment, we're going to wrap up the letter. Jonathan?
Just a quick question. So is the resilience working group, is the plan for it to continue, or is its duty done?
That's right after we agree to finalize the letter.
I'm jumping the gun.
You jumped the gun. All right, are there any more suggestions or changes to the letter before we try and adopt it, to send it? No? Okay.
Do we need to make a motion?
Do we need to make a motion on that?
I'll make the motion to adopt the letter with the changes as noted during our discussion to send to Governor Brown with our new chair's signature.
There's a motion on the floor, is there a second? Richard is seconded the motion. Do you guys like nodding your head, or do you want me to say all those in favor, say aye? What's your preferred method, just so I get in a good habit here? Aye.
Consensus.
If nobody stands up and screams no,
Yeah,
we're probably okay.
That's a good way.
Do what?
It's good.
You want the head nod, all right, I'm hearing mixed reviews.
As an ex officio member, I'd say the eyes work better, because I find when you say head nods, and I nod my head.
Okay, so we don't get a reflexive head nod, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, anyone in opposition? All
Can I
right.
have a point of clarification?
Yes,
Would
sir.
you also be sending the report and the appendix along with that?
Yes.
Yes.
An
It's
enclosure.
referenced as an enclosure.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, so now we're gonna move on to Brad's excellent question, T to,
Jonathan.
I am gonna do that. which teed us up perfectly, and that is really around what happens to the resilience working group next. So when we set up a working group, they're not a permanent standing forever entity, they're, task oriented. And so, the group has been meeting for the last 2 years. It's done a great job, thanks to the university and the students helping us. And, right now, I think that the working group is proposing to conclude its work. Perhaps keeping in mind Megan's excellent point in the discussion that followed, that we should mindfully incorporate resilience into other activities that we're doing, whether it's OA or Rocky Shores or other actions. And so, unless someone has a really strong perspective on that and or a very clear direction about how resilience relates to OPAC's mission and why we should be doing it as a work group, we're going to propose to conclude that work group. So it's open for discussion.
Can I clarify that? Sorry.
Absolutely, Chris?
You said it, but I'm gonna underscore it just because I'm afraid it may have gotten lost in the proposal you were making there, which is in the future, if or as necessary, there's another specific need that comes up, we can reform a resilience working group either with a directive from the governor's office, or I'm not sure if we can do it on our own actually process-wise, but I mean, I think right now we're saying in the absence of something very specific, we're considering ourselves done. But in the future, if there's another specific need, it could be reformed and we could solicit an interest around it at that point in time, knowing what that specific charge would be.
And with the clarification, we're not saying resilience is not important, we're saying it is. I mean, it should be a principle that we work on. Yes, Charlie?
Just kind of building off of that, I mean, if the governor's office were to act on some of these recommendations, would it not be pertinent for OPAC to either reform the working group, or would there be an opportunity for that dialogue to exist within OPAC?
Yes, I think, a couple of vectors I see, and others can correct me. But, one, we do recommend agenda items for us to consider, and so we could have, as things are moving, or as you have things to report, we could add it as an agenda item, which we could hear updates and have a discussion around. It could happen during public testimony, or we could reform a work group and take action at that time. But I think what we're proposing right now is that based on what this group asked us to do in 2015, it's kind of an end point to what those tasks were. And so unless there's more direction from OPAC, then we'll thank the members of that work group and then continue to discuss resilience in other formats. David?
Before we leave this topic, I just want to thank the graduate students at Oregon State University and also Shelby and Hillary for putting this, I think, just really tremendous report together in the time you had available to do so. Everyone was really impressed with it, so I know you're here, and please thank all the other folks that worked together on this, because you guys did a fabulous job, as you heard, and I think we're going to really utilize this. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you for getting the ball rolling. Great project to work on.
Would anyone else like to say anything on that topic and concluding the work group?
One brief observation that David Fox pointed out is there's no authors listed on this. So if Shelby, you'd like to acknowledge the people who actually wrote it, there's still an opportunity, I would say, to do that.
Sure. We can make sure that they are highlighted in the report.
Yeah.
And we'll note that Hillary is also, she'll be sort of continuity as you guys go on.
Support. Yes, support.
Shelby, I didn't see a date either.
We have a date too.
The date was the title on the case, not in the document, so it's just part of the PDF title.
Okay, so with that, we'll be concluding this agenda item with the idea that we will put a date on the report and make sure that the park owners and authors of the report are acknowledged. Shelby?
And thanks to our chief resilience officer for coming out and spending the day with us with OPAC.
Yes, and I do hope that you know from the reaction of the group that not only is this explore those. So it's definitely not a closed topic by any stretch. Okay, so we're on our last agenda item, which is the OPAC meeting schedule. We meet roughly every 6 months. And so, between now and then, there is going to be a lot of activity. We'll be sending this letter, we'll be making some appointments to different committees, as we discussed today. We'll hopefully be trying to recruit someone to fill Robin Hartman's shoes. And we also will be, having a lot of work under the Rocky Shore work group, so including public meetings. But we'll officially get back together as a big group, proposing in early April, hopefully after spring breaks for everyone and in between seasons. So there's the week of April 2nd through the 6th, or the 9th through the 13th. We don't necessarily need to decide that now, but if you know of any major conflicts, conferences, things that are going to take a bunch of people away. Yes, Richard? Council meeting? Which meeting is it?
I don't know either, I can look that up.
And then what we're proposing to do is the Central or South Coast for our next meeting, since we came north this time. And again, we can determine the specific location after this meeting and let you all know, but that's the general idea right now. So, unless we want to discuss the date in detail now, I think what we'll do is collect conflicts and see if there's a good match and then do a doodle poll or something to see what aligns with everyone's calendars. Just something you want to add?
David,
Yeah.
we're talking about the South Coast. When was the last time you went down to the far South Coast, Gold Beach area, Brookings?
It's been a while.
Sanctuary.
Yeah, we abandoned for the sanctuary.
Yeah, that was in May of 2015 that we were abandoned for that 2-day event.
Shelby?
There may be a size issue, but the Port Orford Field Station is,
Okay.
We have met in
A
Port
tremendous
Orford.
view.
What's that?
It does have a great view. Okay, so for tentatively for now on your calendars, just mentally block off the first 2 weeks of April, and then we will nail that down really quick in the next couple of weeks, because I know how competitive it is to get onto your calendars. And like I said, if you have any conflicts, please let me or Andy know, so we can try to avoid it. And then look for a doodle poll in your inbox. So with that, we have about 5 extra minutes. We do not have to spend them. But if you have an update or something that you'd really like to share with the group, you're happy to do it now.
Coming back up like this. How about reception?
Please, if you'd like to. You want to
Yes,
go?
yeah. So we are hosting tonight a no-host reception to recognize both Scott McMullen and David Allen's service to the council.
The OPAC.
Yeah, so everyone on OPAC is invited, but we've invited others as well. So that will start at 5:30 here in this room. There will be a caterer with adult beverages that you can purchase. We will have some finger snacks, and we look forward to seeing you all there in recognition of their time on Oregon's behalf.
Just a quick update. I didn't want my name up there, but it is. But this is really about recognizing Scott and everyone else on OPAC. And Scott will be calling in via satellite phone at 5:25. And we do have a formal something to be presented from the governor's office to Scott, and Skip Hockey, who's the chamber president here in Astoria, is going to be accepting the presentation from the governor's office on behalf of Scott. So if you can be here for at least the first 15 minutes of the reception, you can hear Scott, what he wants to say, and you can be there for the presentation to Skip on behalf of Scott.
Great. So with that, I just want to thank you all for bearing with me through my first meeting. I welcome any suggestions